Hello and welcome everyone to this session. For some people, the first session on Friday and during the last day of DevDays. Just a quick note before we start: the video that I'm about to show is pre-recorded. Well, it's a video, so please, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A section so we can discuss them afterwards. Because live answering won't be possible due to the video. For now, enjoy.
Hello everyone, my name is Pradeep. I'm from Royal Philips, India, and today we will talk about cross-enterprise collaboration to manage the patient care across health networks via XDS and FHIR. A brief introduction about me. I have a total overall software engineering experience of about 12 years working in domains like healthcare and AGNSS, and here's a link to my LinkedIn profile. Let us start on the topic. What is cross-enterprise collaboration to manage the patient health care across health networks? As we know, patient data will be scattered across various healthcare systems in a healthcare environment. It will be very helpful if you can get a complete longitudinal view of the scattered patient health data. This requires some sort of a collaboration between the various parties involved, and this is the topic of the current session. Before we proceed further, some terminologies. IHE, or Integrating the Health Enterprise, is an initiative by the healthcare industry to improve the way in which the computer systems in a healthcare domain interact with each other. For this, they define something called as IHE profiles, which define the common interaction language that can be used for specific clinical workflows. Amongst these profiles, the one that is of interest to us is called as the Cross-Enterprise Document Sharing, or XDS. This is an interoperability profile that facilitates registration, distribution, and access of health documents of patient data across health enterprises. One other form of document that we need to be aware is called as an on-demand document. The on-demand document is a document which is assembled on demand, as the name suggests, at the time of request. So this enables that the latest version of the clinical data is assembled and provided at the time of the request. So before proceeding further, let us look at the challenges that we are facing in the cross-enterprise collaboration. One is the missing common language. As we know, different healthcare systems and modalities have their own different interfaces. Some might speak FHIR, some might speak XDS, some might have their own proprietary interface. So to get an overall complete holistic view, something like a data viewer should be able to speak in all these languages. And this is a challenge. And another challenge that we face is there is no standard FHIR way of performing a document discovery. As we know, there are quite a lot of FHIR stores in the overall healthcare environment, and any viewer or any system that needs to access the patient data needs to go through each of these FHIR stores to say, okay, do you have this data? Do you have this data? So there is no clear way in which the document discovery can be performed as per the FHIR standards. Let us talk of the session scope. In this session, we will talk about our learnings using the IHE On-Demand Document, or the XDS.b profile, for federating the XDS registries and the FHIR data sources. We will look at how we can actually enable an automated workflow that enables the on-demand document discovery using XDS registries. We'll also look into a workflow on how we can retrieve the on-demand document containing the FHIR information from a FHIR source. These are some of the typical actors in an XDS integration workflow. As you can see, the document registry is a central entity wherein the metadata about the documents are stored. This includes where the document is actually located. The document repository is where the actual document is contained. So this will be the source of the data. The document source produces and updates the information about the documents into the document registry. A document consumer is someone who wants this data and then talks to the document registry to get the information about it, and then actually retrieves the data via the document repository. Another party here is the on-demand document source, which produces on-demand documents as opposed to the other stable documents, and updates the information about the same into the registry. XDS, as we know, is a widely adopted data sharing mechanism in a healthcare enterprise. It can also help us in discovering where the documents are located. FHIR servers, as we all know, can act as document repositories. A central XDS server can act as the document registry. What is currently missing in the landscape is a mechanism for automatically updating the metadata about the FHIR documents into the document registry. Also, there is no bridging entity that can speak to both FHIR and XDS interfaces. Also, we need a workflow in which the latest version of the FHIR documents are fetched as opposed to doing a batch push or a push mechanism. Before we continue, let us have some assumptions. We assume that all the actors in the integrated workflow can communicate with each other. They have the appropriate authorization and authentication permissions. The documents being shared are all valid, such as authenticity, validity, everything is fine. And the deployment models of the services are irrelevant for our current discussion. Let us see how we can use XDS and FHIR to bridge both worlds. FHIR servers support the concept of subscription, where a consumer or a subscriber can create a subscription based on a specific search criteria. Once any resource or document meeting these criteria are registered into the FHIR servers, they will notify the registered subscribers. In this case, let us see how we can make use of this for registering the metadata about the documents. As we know, we have a healthcare system, we have a FHIR server, we have the XDS document registry. Additionally, we will have a service called as a bridge, which can speak to both FHIR and the XDS document registry. What the bridge does, it will create a subscription based on some specific criteria. Once the subscription is created, the same is acknowledged by the FHIR server. And later, at a later point in time, when a document meeting this criteria is pushed into the FHIR server by a healthcare system, the FHIR server shall notify the bridge, saying that it has some document which matches the required criteria. The bridge will then fetch this document and then create a metadata about the on-demand document and register this into the XDS document registry. So at this point, you can see that using this mechanism, we can have updated metadata about all the documents that are getting registered into various FHIR servers. The next step is to see how we can retrieve the same. So assume we have an XDS consumer who wants a specific on-demand document. So they will request the bridge to get this information. The bridge, since it can speak to both XDS and FHIR, will talk to the XDS document registry to get the metadata about this specific on-demand document. Once the metadata is obtained, it will be able to understand where the document is actually located. So it will talk to the FHIR server, get the FHIR document, and return the same back to the XDS consumer embedded into a on-demand document. At this point, the XDS consumer can consume the FHIR resource as it wants to. Another key aspect in this entire thing is the patient identity resolution. Having multiple healthcare systems means that there might not be a single way in which a patient can be identified. If one system refers to a patient John Doe as John_Doe_12345, another system might refer to the same patient via Doe.John.12345. So we need to have a common identifier for a specific patient. For this, we can make use of the available options like mobile patient identifier cross-referencing or the PIXM IHE profile, or we can even make use of the $match operations provided by the FHIR servers. And there are, of course, third-party patient identity management systems, which we can also make use of. Another alternative to consider is the MHD or the mobile access to health documents. This is again a healthcare IHE profile, which enables FHIR access to the XDS system. So what this means is that the XDS system is a bit complex, as you all know. It uses SOAP, but MHD provides a simpler API for the existing XDS system. While the MHD profile doesn't support all of the XDS workflows, we can decide based on the existing use case or the new use case whether to opt for a MHD profile or to go with the approach that we previously discussed. Some of the challenges that we are facing during this approach of using the bridge entity. So we have multiple FHIR servers. XDS is a stable interface, so the communication between the bridge and XDS happens in a standard way. But each of the FHIR servers might be using different versions of FHIR. Some might be R4, some might be STU3, some might be DSTU2. So the bridge needs to be able to understand each of these FHIR versions. Also, once the same information has been provided back to the XDS consumer, if the XDS consumer needs to consume the FHIR resource, it also needs to be able to speak in all these FHIR languages for the FHIR versions. Also, since we have multiple hops and translation here, for example, between FHIR and XDS, there might be some additional latency introduced into the system, which should be acceptable. So in conclusion, we can see how we can make use of FHIR subscriptions and the XDS on-demand documents to ensure that we have the metadata about the available FHIR documents in a central entity, and we can fetch the latest versions of the same as FHIR documents on demand. This way, we can have a cross-enterprise collaboration between various health systems and we will be able to get a patient-centric longitudinal view. These are some of the references that we have used. We will be able to get a patient-centric longitudinal view. These are some of the references that we have used. So you can contact me here for any of the queries. Thank you. Any questions on the same?
All right. Thank you very much for your video. Right before we move to the questions, are there any, or is there any part that you maybe want to elaborate on a bit? You only had 10 minutes to make a video. Maybe you can explain a bit more.
Sure, Walter. Yes, thank you. Thank you everyone for attending the session. One thing probably which we can also touch upon, which we could not cover in the presentation. See, we want to include all the systems into this entire collaboration workflow. There might be situations where we have FHIR servers handy and we can make use of the same as we had seen through the video. There might be quite a lot of legacy systems which don't speak in FHIR as well. So for this, we've been seeing various approaches in which we can actually onboard these systems into the FHIR environment. For example, one is using the FHIR flow and FHIR messages and the use of something like a FHIR facade. So if we have any such mechanisms in place, we will be able to include these legacy systems as well. And this will, of course, enable the document discovery. They will enable more systems to take part in the cross-enterprise collaboration. Yeah, so that's something that we could not add into the session, but yeah, that's how one thing we can actually do as well. Thanks, Walter.
Let me unmute myself. Sorry. There's one question. How are fine-grained patient access to consent supported? So how do you deal with the patient consents?
Yes. So yeah, one thing definitely is that when we are sharing the data across, we need to have access control entities in between, though not indicated in the diagram. Of course, the security aspect of it will mean that we will have access control mechanisms in between, which indicate whether these patient information can be shared across the collaboration basic for the cross enterprise collaboration. If a patient has not at all provided their consent for any such collaborative workflow, of course, will not be able to do so. Also, we also have an option to even save the consent as one of the FHIR resources, right? So even using this, we will be able to see if the particular information can be shared across. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yes, yes, definitely.
Okay.
Then there's a second question. How do you handle variations in profiling in the FHIR servers?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes. Hello. Yeah, sorry. Yes, so that's a good question. So each profile indicates, of course, there's quite a, I mean, each profile will have their own set of constraints, right? So at the moment, we will have to still see that. I mean, as I mentioned, one of the challenges we are facing at the beginning itself is that the FHIR versions themselves can be different. Of course, that will also mean that even the profiles, of course, in each of the FHIR server or each of the workflow differ. So I think that's still one of the open points which we still need to address. Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Are there actually any other open points that you also need to address apart from the variation handling that you can discuss as well?
Yes. So, well, one was definitely the variations. XDS is a stable system, but FHIR, as we saw, can have multiple variations in multiple entities. So that will be one thing. And apart from the variations, security is definitely an aspect. So the consent thing about the point about the consent also enforces that. So if a patient has not at all provided their consent, then there's no way we can actually ensure that the system can participate in the cross-enterprise collaboration. I'm just trying to think of any other things.
Well, sure. actually, in the meantime, there's another question as well, so we can go to that one. Sure. Can episodic data be queried across the enterprises?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Can episodic data be queried across the enterprises?
Not sure what episodic data refers to. Sorry. We'll just ask Revati. She's my teammate. Revati, are you aware of this?
Yeah, so I believe the question is related to the episode of care FHIR resources. So in fact, the way we handle the data sharing of the FHIR resources across the enterprises, it's the same approach actually, even for with respect to the episode of care as well. So depending upon the the consent or the referral workflow, the episode of care data information also could be shared across enterprises, provided we define the subscription rules and the security rules for the same. So that mechanism, depending on what kind of data we want to share, that's actually a configuration that we have where we define these rules, which actually would be evaluated when the data needs to be retrieved post its publication into the index, and leveraging the index to actually do the data lookup and then subsequent retrieval. So these are the rules that actually get evaluated.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for joining in, actually. Great explanation. Good to help each other out. There's another question. Which resources are you using on the FHIR server side?
Yeah, so in fact, on the FHIR server side, the mechanism what we built for is in fact it's a very generic mechanism. You could use any of the FHIR resources, but the use case which actually enabled us to build this capability was a need for sharing the diagnostic report, some of the observations, some lab reports across enterprises with respect to some of the care providers who are not in a specific enterprise but want to still look up into the patient records and get a unified view of all this information that exists for a patient in a different location. So that was the use case which actually triggered us to build this capability, primarily from a report sharing perspective.
All right, thank you very much. Pradeep, do you have anything to add to that as well, or maybe
No,
she gave a complete answer?
Yeah, that's a complete answer. Yes, that covers quite a lot of things. So, but as just to summarize, it means that any FHIR resource can be used in this collaboration. So there's no limitation as such on that.
All right, thank you very much. Actually, if there are no new questions right now, of course, people are free to keep adding them after the session is over, as you can still answer them. But for now, thank you very much for your time. Wait, actually, no, sorry. Thank you very much for your time, both of you, and enjoy the rest of DevDays.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Revati. Thanks, Walter. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.